This week, we're talking about foster care with Marie Briggs, the executive director of Beloved. We'll talk more about what that ministry does, but they really seek to raise awareness and educate the church about the need for foster care and for the needs of families who are fostering children and how to support them. I'm Charles Gallaudet, president of Vision New England, and your host for the Church in Action. Marie, thanks so much for being with us.
Thank you so much for having me.
Can you give, for folks just who don't know you, a little bit about your bio and how you came to be where you are and working at Beloved?
Yeah, of course. So my name is Marie, and I am a mother of 5 children. And I began this work with Beloved in about 2015. I was a special ed teacher for about 20 years and had a little girl in my class who ended up, years later, we ended up adopting her and her sister. So I kind of got involved with foster care through that. And during, the past 7 years, I have worked as a CASA guardian and worked with Beloved and our local community through outreach. And I've also done a lot of advocacy work and served in executive committees for child welfare and done foster parent support groups for the last 7 years. So.
And Marie, you said CASA guardian. What does that term mean?
It means a court-appointed special advocate in the state of Maine. CASA guardians they serve as a guardian ad litem for child welfare cases.
So that's where the court is appointing you to be a guardian over a child who's in foster care, or not necessarily?
Correct. Yeah.
Okay. So can you maybe set the stage for folks, because everybody knows that there's such a thing as foster care, but how big is the need? I know you specialize in Maine. Can you quantify the size of the issue for us and how much is really needed that's not being dealt with today?
Yeah, I mean, I feel like the need has always been great. I feel like, anytime you have a government system that's sort of overseeing, things like this, you tend to have large numbers of waiting children or children who are in need of foster homes. The state of Maine specifically does have a large need for foster parents to come forward. There's about 2,200 children in our state's foster care system currently. And in the state of Maine, that's very different. There's a lot of rural areas where, it's a little bit less, but for the most part, there is a pretty great need. It's hard to sustain this work long term because it is very difficult and it requires a lot. So it's, getting the right people at the right time to be able to fill those spots.
So when you talk about 2,200 kids in the foster care system, does that mean they're actively being fostered by a family, or would those be kids waiting to get to a foster family?
So it's both. So there's 22 children within the system that are in the care of DHS.
And so if they're not being fostered, then they're in some congregant care, group housing situation before they get? No,
they're all being fostered. There are some children who are awaiting a placement. And in our state, sometimes that would typically mean they'd be staying in a hotel room.
Okay.
Or, they would be in a temporary foster placement awaiting, a more permanent situation.
Okay. And of course, if Maine has 2,200 kids, we know the problem is much bigger in the more populous states. And so it's, can multiply the factors pretty big, right? And so now your ministry is a Christian ministry.
Correct.
Is stepping in space. So what does Beloved do?
So Beloved itself has kind of changed over the years. So when we initially came on the scene, Beloved was I was working at the time with the Forgotten Initiative, which is a national foster care initiative. And we sort of found that the Forgotten Initiative wasn't serving, because they had a very narrow lane, they weren't really serving children who were at risk or families that had already adopted. And so we felt like organizationally that we needed to kind of broaden our scope and sort of be doing some more things. And what I felt was when God really put this ministry on my heart in the beginning, I took a real secular view, I believe, that I know now. Looking at the problem, I wanted to impose sort of a secular solution to a spiritual issue. And so what I ended up doing was really focusing a lot of my work and time in advocacy, in recruitment, in speaking, and trying to engage the church in this solution. And what I've learned long term, Jason Johnson does a really great job of sharing this model of like a river, and how as Christians sometimes we can focus on rescuing children from the middle of this river, and how we really need to focus our efforts sometimes to look upstream and to wonder why all of these kids are getting in, to wonder why all of this stuff is happening in our state, and how can the church engage in that. And so as time has sort of gone on, as I have really been just in the trenches of foster care and with foster families, I've realized that I believe I was asking the wrong questions. I believe I was doing work that was sort of me imposing my solution versus me really seeking God and his word, and how the church is called to care for families and to really engage in a solution that's really just going to make a difference to keep families intact.
And so can you give us an example? So what was some of the things you said you would have done, which sounds maybe like, is triage a fair word? You're trying to triage versus what you're trying to do that sounds preventative now.
Yes. So we were kind of trying to do all the things, right? So I was involved in advocacy stuff at the state level, trying to impose policy change, because everybody who works in foster care knows no matter what state you're in, it's a very broken system. Yeah. And so how I was trying to fit the church in there, I was going to churches and recruiting foster families, trying to share this gospel message with the church, and try to just kind of really share my story in hopes that I would encourage other foster families to want to get into this work. But what I learned long term was this work is very, very difficult, and not everyone is called to be a foster parent, and that it can be detrimental. It can be very damaging to families if it's not the right thing, because a lot of believers will this pulls on their heart, this issue. They want to help. They just don't know how. And oftentimes becoming a foster parent I feel is not necessarily the only avenue. I think there's a lot of other really great work that the church can do, and really important work. And, Beloved now, our ministry really seeks to provide tangible items for at-risk families and families that are involved in foster care, support, foster families, and and just really strengthen families is sort of our mission, but we're doing a lot of work on the ground. And it really took me, God really had to humble me and take me to a place where I had to seek after the way he was doing ministry, you know what I mean? Instead of the way that I felt I was going to solve the solution.
Yeah, there's a number of people who've said to me, it's always easier to grab onto what God is doing than to decide what we're going to do and then get God on board. But we tend to start with the latter and work our way to the former, just like you're saying. And so it sounds, so there are some people, so the church is clearly called to care for orphans. And I know we're not necessarily talking about literal orphans here, but we're called.
And that's the other issue too, is that I believe that we are called, but I think, if we really look at those scriptures, a lot of these children are, we're not called to rescue children from their families, right? Mm. We're called to love others. We're called to be the church. And we get that mixed up when we think we're going to rescue these kids from their families. Yeah. It's really important that we are strengthening families and trying to keep them together, because foster care isn't really about giving a home to a child. It's a temporary situation where you're supporting reunification.
Yeah. And while it might be a calling for the church, it's not necessarily a calling for every person in the church. We're not all equipped to do it, called to do it. And some of us, to your point, I think I remember somebody in Connecticut in Department of Child and Family saying, you think you can either help or not help, and you need to realize you can also hurt.
Yeah.
Right. And so some of us may go in thinking, well, I won't do damage, but in fact, we might do damage. And it's because it's not an easy place. It's, as you're saying, it's a hard place. And so what does that look like then? So when you talk about you're trying to keep families together, what are some things you do to try and keep as opposed to the court? I'm putting words in your mouth, so take them out if they're not the right words. But you're trying to deal with it, as opposed to the court taking a child from a family and saying, okay, they need to be in foster care. You're trying to work with families to make it so that child can stay in that family and still be safe and cared for. So what does that look like? How do you do that?
Right. So I think every church has, different gifts within their congregation, obviously. At our church, at Mercy Chapel, we have really, Beloved in and of itself is a ministry where we work with local agencies, school departments, hospitals, any agency that's serving children. And what happens is those agencies, when they identify a child who is at risk, they just simply go onto our website, they send in a request, and our team of volunteers, we have a donation center, goes into that donation center, gets those items together that are requested, and then delivers them to the family. And this is the part that is just so amazing. So, for example, that we would oftentimes get a phone call from a nurse at the local hospital where we have a birthing center. The nurse from the birthing unit sends in a request, says there's this family, they're staying in a hotel, they don't have a place for the infant to sleep or a car seat to bring them home. And our team immediately will go into our donation center that day or that week, gather those items together that are generously donated by our congregation, by our community, and they will load them up in their car, drive them to the family's house, and in this incredible interaction, not only provide for the needs of that family, and we sometimes say that's, like a Band-Aid on a bullet hole. There's going to be another need the next day. But in that moment, they're able to go in, talk to the family, engage with them. If they're open to it, share the gospel with them and pray with them. And it's just this incredible interaction, right? For us to not only be providing, and I'm telling you, we're getting between 3 and 10 requests a week from local agencies. So we're out in the field a lot doing this work. And being able to share this with these families is just incredibly impactful. Yeah. And so I think, to answer your question, each church has its own gift and how they're going to engage, with families. But I don't necessarily believe that the Bible is calling the church itself to engage in this by, people within their congregation becoming foster parents. I think there are certain people who are called to that work, but I don't think, I think people need to stop saying, well, I can't foster, so I don't know what else I can do, because there's a lot that can be done.
Well, that's what I love about what your ministry is, because there are some people who would say, well, I see the need, but right, I just can't, I'm not the right person for that. Now, some of those people may be wrong and they may be the right people, but, and some of us who think we're the right people may not be the right people, but I want to do something. And what I love about what you guys are doing is you're providing a channel for what I just found out is hundreds of times a year, you're there at a touch point that is critical in someone's life, right? Which is what we're called to do as the church. And it opens the door to talk about Jesus, opens the door, it might open the door to pray with them, those kinds of things. We're meant to do it anyway, but that's a great opportunity for evangelism then. So you're providing car seats in a situation. Now, how does that help a child stay with the family? Is the issue in that specific example, and maybe it's not as direct and obvious, was it, well, without a car seat, they're not taking their kid home. They can't have their kid, right?
No, and it is pretty direct. It is very simple. We complicate things oftentimes, right? And so the solution is very simple. The caseworker calls me on a Friday and says, I'm pulling the child because they're sleeping on the floor. Wow. And our organization goes in that weekend and brings a bed for that dad who took in that child because the mom is receiving treatment. And without that bed, that dad that was not a viable placement for that child. Wow. And so for the church to be able to step in and tangibly help that dad to be able to take that kid in, and these are real situations that happen, every week, that it might just be that one thing that's preventing him from being able to be, an option for placement and to keep that child with a family member or to keep that child with the biological parents. And it's, and we do serve foster families. We serve foster families all the time who take in children and need items because in our state, they're not always provided. But the bigger picture, the more important question that I found is just, how does the church engage in strengthening families? How does the church engage in raising up godly men who are going to remain in the lives of their children?
And so it sounds like you've developed something of a warehouse. I'm not sure how big it is, so I don't want to overstate it for you. But it sounds like you're collecting stuff all the time,
Mm-hmm.
so that you've got a warehouse to go into and say, okay, pull the car seat, pull the crib, or do this kind of thing. Now, you said churches are contributing those things. So that's a clear way people can plug in and support what you're doing, right? Is to provide money and materials for that. And you said the community too. Have you developed relationships with, I don't know, Kohl's or Walgreens or whatever? Do they provide things for you, or or have you not been able to exploit that kind of those resources?
Not in the big sense like that, but we have we do a community baby shower once a year. We've done events like that where we engage local businesses to provide items. I mean, our community baby shower was huge, and it engaged local agencies providing resources for new moms, and also creating a space where local businesses could get behind the wheel too and be able to be a part of that process and providing these items. What we want to do is we want to see a community collectively come together to be able to provide for families that are in need. And we see that all the time where people on social media especially are really wanting to engage in helping, single moms or people that are in need of certain items at certain times of the year. For example, right now we just got this big snowstorm, and parents are, scrambling, trying to find gear for their kids to be outside. This is the time of year we get a lot of requests from the school department. And I think that there are ways for not just the local church, but for the local church to lead the way with, in partnership with local businesses.
So you mentioned community baby shower. What is that? Is that just a time where we come together to raise the equipment that's needed, or is it something bigger than that?
It's something bigger than that. So it's really a day to be able to. You hear a lot of pro-life stuff out in the world where folks are really pushing this issue of if a mom decides to keep her baby, where's the church in that regard? And to see the church host this day where families would come and they would have this wonderful meal that they would be able to get information from local agencies. They would be able to pick out they had like little like tickets, and they were able to win all of these amazing, incredible new pieces of furniture for their babies. It was really like, thinking about those moms who don't have a car seat when they're in the hospital coming home. What is that like to not have that support system? And so agencies locally that knew of moms who were expecting were able to register moms for this baby shower, and we were able to pamper them for the day and really just share and love on them and be able to help prepare them for this next season of life.
Wow. And so you must be something of an entrepreneur to have started this. Is that fair, or is this completely outside your wheelhouse when you got started?
This is completely outside of my wheelhouse. So the only way I got involved in this, like I said, is I adopted 2 children with special needs from foster care. And so when the Lord really just kind of threw me in there, I feel like he gave me eyes to see something that I couldn't turn away from. And so I don't think that I personally have done anything. I feel like I have an incredible team of volunteers. I feel like collectively, this has just been God's people really just coming together, people who just love him and people who believe his word and believe what it says and want to see his kingdom, just want to see children safe, heard, and loved. And that's all we're about at the end of the day, is just really, doing the Lord's work. We want to be about his business, and we want to be, sharing the gospel.
We sometimes have the idea that, government doesn't like to work with us Christians organizations, and sometimes there's hostility. That's fair enough. But a lot of times they really do like to work with us when we're helping with their mission, which is, I think, where you are. And so what's your experience working with, whether it's local government or agencies or statewide agencies? What kind of relationship do you have with them?
We actually have a really good relationship, but it's been built over the years. So it wasn't always like that. When we first came into this, arena, there was a lot of brokenness between the church and, government agencies, and especially in the times that we're living in today. If you become a foster parent, you have to understand that you're going to be foster parenting, but you're going to have to parent the way that, that the department's telling you to. And so that can be kind of conflicting, as a parent. So it's a rough place to be, but I do know that the work that we've done, we've built a solid relationship. It takes time, but it can be done. And I think you're right. I think that they do look to us for support. And I think that they know now, after so many years, that we mean what we say, and that, they know our motivation is real. They know that, we're going to do what we say we're going to do. So, and they know we're in it for the long run. We've been doing this for quite a while, and we make their job a little bit easier, and that's a good thing, because they're really overworked, especially the child support.
Yeah, sorry. That's what I've seen that in other places too, and you guys are a great example of it. This issue that if we go in with the idea that we're going to make them do what we want to do, right? That's not going to work.
No.
But they know there's holes in the system, and they know they can't fill some of those holes. And when somebody comes along and it's perfectly aligned to our mission, and we step into it with a collaborative spirit, it seems that they become big advocates of ours sometimes.
Yes, and we actually, I think, are renewing some things for them. I think we're not only sharing the gospel, we're not only just kind of, we want to get out there and be a reflection of God's love. So when we're out there working with a foster parent, that's wonderful. We're out there working with an agency representative, and they're like, oh my gosh, I can't believe what this church, what this church and community is doing for these families. It's powerful stuff. It gets people curious about who God is.
And do you see people, and that's not the metric of this, because we're called to care for people and love people regardless of whether they ever come to Jesus, but do you actually see people start going to church, make professions of faith?
We do, yes. And we've seen, I've been at this long enough that I've been blessed to see people, years later, who have said to me, that this ministry has just meant so much to them, that this was, one of the hardest times they were going through with their family, and they felt like there was nobody who saw them or was, really, really cared about what they were going through. And so I think that's what makes us a little bit different too, is, like I said, we're not just showing up with a Band-Aid, but we're showing up to really just love on our community, and to, we really care about what they're going through. And so I think that in this world today, that's something that people value. So.
Is it more typical in your work that you help me out once and we probably never see each other again? Or are there families that you have ongoing relationships with over time, and you really get involved with them over a period of time, or for years even?
I think the true is it's true both. With foster families, obviously we see them a lot. Mm-hmm. So we see the same foster families over and over again, because, as they're taking in new placements and stuff, we get to know them pretty well. With regard to other families, I hope that we don't continue to see them, but sometimes we do. And, and that's okay. We want to be able to be there for them, in their time of need. So I think
if somebody does have a sense that, hey, maybe fostering is for me,
yeah,
what would you say to them to kind of figure out the answer to that potential call?
Well, for me personally, I think that I would like to explore that with them. We have, like I said before, we've done support groups, we've done introductions. I myself am a TBRI practitioner, which is a trauma-based relational intervention. And so we do a lot of trainings and stuff to equip parents to be able to take kids in. And I would oftentimes ask people, if this is something that you really want to do, take the time, pray about it, speak to your pastor, speak to your elders, really, explore if this is going to be a good fit for your family. Because the motivation may be there for you to get involved in this work. But the honest truth is, like I said, it can really put a strain on your relationships. And it's a spiritual battlefield. And if you're not ready and you're not equipped, it can be damaging. So it's really important that people really pray about it and take the time to make sure that this is what God wants for their family.
It's a great point, because I've been aware through people like you and others that, foster kids have a lot of people that come and go in their lives, and you don't want to be just another person who disappears from their life if it turns out this isn't for you.
Right.
So figuring it out and getting it right up front is a big deal. I love the idea of talk to elders, talk to your pastor, right? Really explore it, and probably find other foster families and really try and learn what that experience is like. Or reach out to Beloved and talk to you. How can people find out more about Beloved, and how could they get in touch with you if they wanted to?
So we are at mercychapelmaine.org. And you can get some information on there. And if you're interested in learning more about foster care in the state of Maine, you can check out a familyforme.org, which is an organization that helps people to go through the process of becoming licensed. And it's okay to get the information, but like I said, I think it's really important to explore that, with other people, like you said, or your pastor.
And I know some states, I don't know if Maine does this, but I know some states, I believe it was Connecticut, and I think New Hampshire is doing it. They've got special workshops for church people who are exploring foster care to talk through what they do. And as you know, right, they provide education money and medical care and all that kind of stuff, and deal with the stuff about what about our faith and these children and some of the other government mandates in it, and try and help people work through some of that stuff. And so, Marie, what have I not asked you about that you think is a really important point in this conversation?
Geez, it's a lot. I just, it's been such a privilege to be able to serve the community where I live, and I've learned so much. And I think that, the point I really felt like I needed to make today was just that I think we have been getting some of these things wrong, that the church has an incredible heart to want to help vulnerable children. But I do believe that we need to look at the bigger picture. Yeah. And I think we need to really start to change the way that we are caring for families in general. And I think that, the more the church can support families and, just raise up, like I said, godly men who are going to lead their families, that as a culture that we can, that can be okay,
Well, and I remember you telling me years ago when we first met that, sometimes a foster family just needs somebody to watch their kids for a couple of hours because they'd never get a break. And so I think you're right. As we can hear that foster care problem of saying that's too big for me and I'm not that person and I'm not called that, I can't, and therefore there's nothing for me to do. And what I loved about what you're doing is actually there's a ton of things you can do.
Yeah, there is.
Without being called to that. And let's not let that be the obstacle to doing something today, because there's a lot of families who need help, not just foster families, but people who you can keep that family together too, which is a great point. And so
if it was the culture of the church too, that we just did that naturally, right? Like organically, that if a family in our church decided they wanted to do foster care, that the church would just step up and just help them. You know what I mean? It should be part of our church culture. But if it's not, there are so many resources today in 2023, for churches to be able to, to get that information. I know you had a gentleman on a few weeks ago, Jonathan Reed,
yep.
Who there are a lot of people out there like Jonathan who, can help also equip these churches, with tangible ways that they can wrap around these families.
Yeah. Jonathan is leading Fostering Hope down in Rhode Island, an organization doing some similar things that you guys are doing. Right? So there's some similarities and some differences. And I agree, we need more of this. And church culture, the church needs to change, right? That's something we're all kind of struggling with in a whole bunch of areas, but in this space in particular, right, where it should just be natural. Oh, right, we're so involved in each other's lives because we love each other so much that I know you have this need, and I want to support you in that need. And right, we think about the early church as so different than what some of us experience in church. And we've got to figure out our way back to that. And so that's a great reminder for us. So thank you. Marie, thanks so much for taking some time to be with us today. And thanks for leading such a great ministry and having such a great impact and doing it over for such a long time horizon, right? We often lose attention on things in the church, and you're not one of those people. And so I'm really grateful to you.
No,
Thanks.
thank you.
Thanks. And I'd like to thank our producer, Jess Mangano, and our listeners. This program is created by Vision New England, which accelerates evangelism by helping the church make disciples, do justice, and foster unity so that we can share Jesus and New England is transformed. Thanks so much. You can find more resources at visionnewengland.org. And Marie, can you give me your URL one more time for folks who want to find you?
Sure. It's mercychapelmaine.org.
Thanks so much. If you can't find that, let us know at Vision New England. We'll get you hooked up. You can find more resources, as I said, at visionnewengland.org. This program is brought to you by our friends at the Luis Palau Association, who are dedicated to proclaiming the good news, uniting the church, and impacting cities worldwide. God bless you, and thanks for listening.